you wish you could have slowed down and enjoyed it more. You always hear that from the guys, but then you just was wanting to get to the next town, getting to the next booking. Andre the Giant, for an example, I'm one of the few guys, my biggest regret, being around him as much as I was, I never got a picture made with him. That's one of the biggest regrets. You see Andre, you think, I'll just get it next week. I mean, you're around him every week, and all of a sudden, this big, 8-foot monster, it's just normal to you. And it's sad that I say that, but you're around him, and that's one of my biggest regrets. I wished I'd have got a picture. I see all these great pictures in the magazines of Andre holding 8 or 9 people, and I wish I could have done that. That's one of the things I regret. Even now, people think, well, we all just jump on a plane and we fly and we just go to work, but they don't understand, and it's not nearly as bad as it was. But, when we were working for Crockett, when Crockett was just on top of the world, we were working 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. So you would basically leave out on Monday, and some of the towns were pretty short, but you drove everywhere that you went. And of course, I worked a little bit in Florida, which was kind of rough, but of course, Bill Watts' territory when there was no interstates. And you went on these 300 or 400 mile trips, and you really learned to cook a meal in the back seat, the bologna blowouts that everybody talks about. At the time, first time I ever made a real road trip, I didn't know what trans was. I didn't know you paid a guy. I just thought these old guys were being nice. So they took me on like a 400 mile trip, and we get back, and I get ready to get out, and they told me Sonny Fargo. He said, kid, what about trans? I don't know what trans is. He said, you owe us 4 cents a mile. I said, excuse me. I think I still owe them for that. 4 cents a mile, about 400. And so, but I just thought these guys were being nice to me. So I got an on-the-road education of being there about what trans is. Sometimes you drove, and then you learned to really be cheap on the road, and how to put 8, 9 guys in a motel room and split it. And but you learn those. I miss it now. I mean, now, you tell guys. I just talked to some guys down in Florida with that training facility, and they were talking about some of the towns, and I said, y'all don't like meat? You like the Waffle House and, ride together? And he said, what are you talking about? I said, you mean y'all take like 8 cars to one town? He said, yeah, we don't like ride together. And they've never, that part of the business, something that simple, because I learned more in the back seat listening to like Ronnie Garvin or Wahoo, and I learned more in the back seat than I ever learned, anywhere else about the business. And it's just listening, you got all this knowledge. I get mad now when, like even now, we had Ricky Steamboat come in and do a autograph session not long ago, and I wanted to see him because I hadn't seen him, and I love Ricky Steamboat. And I got there, and I go in the dressing room, and he's sitting by Seth. And there's 300 independent workers over here, going over their stupid matches and all this. But I stopped, and it startled me because here's this legend, the nicest guy in the business with all this knowledge, and nobody's talking to him. So, buddy, I went right over there. He almost sees me coming and said, oh, no. Because there's always something I remember he did, of course, with Jay Youngblood that I want to ask him about. But that just summed up our business now. All these guys are over here, and it's like they don't even know who Ricky Steamboat is. It's just the whole training part with being on the road. And I never, to this day, I hate it. Honestly, when my first son was born, I would drive home 200 miles to put him to bed, and then drive back 200 to the town. The guys used to think I was nuts. Just get a room. But, having a son and, of course, my other 4 kids, as much as I could come home, I'd come home to them. Take them to school, for that same old, take them, they got so tired of me dropping them off at school. There's a senior in high school, I want to take them to school, they take you to your class. So that part of it, the traveling is probably the roughest part, and that's when your body, most of the guys, even myself, that have trouble walking or even sleeping, yeah, it's from the ring, but a lot of it is all those miles. You're sitting in a car for 400 or 500 miles. Even in Crockett, when we had a chance to fly, if I could still drive, I would love to do that because you could stop when you wanted. You didn't have to listen to anything. You take your time. I'd leave a day early just to drive. And I've spent probably more time in a car than, what's funny now is with my kids, now they got their license, they don't understand why I don't want to drive. I don't care if you know how to drive. You drive. My girl says, you trust me, Daddy? Yeah, all those years on the road, yeah, I trust you. Matter of fact, my first son, little George, of course, the night he was born, I was in the ring. And it's sad. Now I made it to 2 seconds before he was delivered. I made it, but I came walking in. I was in a cage match, if you can believe this. Blood everywhere, wrestling boots on, and I actually went straight to the hospital. And what's so funny, the promoter, I was the big heel for this guy, and people had a good little house that night. Well, he announced over the speaker that, at the time I was wrestling as Iron Man, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to let you know that Iron Man's wife is in labor, And of course, these people went from booing me to now everybody's, yeah, yeah. You know, I said, no, I don't want them to cheer me. So I went and worked the match, if you can believe that. Jumped in there. Matter of fact, I had the guy fight outside, throwed me in my car, and I drove straight to Charlotte, North Carolina, and got there in time. Blood, wrestling boots on, still had my trunks on. So my first son was delivered with my wrestling boots on. And so made it for that. But then, of course, you know, right after that, I went on the road, you know, for 2 weeks straight, right after that. And he's 27 years old now and ain't never let me forget that, you know, that, Daddy, you left me. You know, day after I was here, you left for 2 weeks. But I don't regret any of it because, like, even now, I mean, my kids will do interviews sometimes and they'll say, well, what about your dad wasn't never around? But we really made up for it, you know, for the time that we were together. And of course, the birthday thing's still hard for me to this day. You know, calling home is not the same. Of course, now everybody says you can text them, you can, you know, the iPhones, you can do all that now, but it still ain't like, you know, being there. And I've done a lot of apologizing, you know, over the years. You know, a lot of times we would time it, you know, you're trying to save money, and we'd go from one town to another and try to time it mileage-wise where we wouldn't have time to sleep in a motel. And I know that sounds crazy nowadays, but we wouldn't spend the money. We'd go from town A and leave a little bit later and stop and eat and drive slow or stop a few times and get to where we could get in the building the next day and always crash on the sofa. All the buildings had showers. So, man, you know, for about 3 or 4 months, I didn't even have a power bill, water bill, or nothing because we just, you know, you learn the buildings that would let you in. And, you know, you respect people, respect their property and stuff. And a lot of times, a lot of the fans would cook you a meal. You know, a lot of times we get to the town early and some of the diehard fans, you go by their house and eat. Just you miss that because they lived, eat, and breathed it. And to have you in their home was a great thing. So, but that's my biggest regret. I wished I'd have slowed down and really enjoyed that time. Because then, you know, and old timers used to tell me, slow down, kid. Just slow down and enjoy it. And I'm thinking, there's too much I want to do. And as a lot of that starts disappearing in our business, you wish you could go back to that. Because, you know, we went to the same towns over and over, you know, like once a week. A lot of towns, and a lot of the fans don't understand that now because it's like once every 6 months they run Charlotte or Greensboro. But, of course, back then, you know, every Monday night was like Greenville, South Carolina. Tuesday was probably Raleigh, which was, you know, about 3.5 hours one way. And what's so amazing is fans think that you didn't drive back that night. So it was almost like an 8-hour trip, round trip. So, and, of course, Wednesday would go to Columbia, like Columbia, South Carolina. And then you always had maybe one of the big shows, Greensboro or Charlotte on the weekend. But you did Fayetteville. And, of course, like I said, you know, the interstates were just really becoming really, really big back, you know, when I first started with Crockett. So a lot of it was back roads. A lot of it where now it may take you an hour or 2 hours. It took you 6 hours, you know, back then to get to these little old towns. And I miss it because it was, you know, little high school gyms, little armories, little places like that would draw unbelievable crowds. And that's what I hear now is, you know, people now, they hate going to the Coliseums because, you know, if I was a guy, you know, if you take a guy like me, a dad that's got 5 kids, time you pay for parking, you know, time you get in there, you done spend a fortune. So we're trying to just keep the armories and high schools, you know, alive just for that, just for the big families that still enjoy it.